Resume of the former video. Surprising and extreme arrivals and population turnover events occurred in Europe and across Western Eurasia just 4,500 years ago. Most of the arrivals in Europe and Western Eurasian do carry a for Eurasia totally new YDNA haplogroup R1b, so they are immigrants, and they are not at all native Europeans or native Eurasians. The continents they could have originated from are Africa, the Americas, Oceania, including Australia, and Indonesia. Scientists like David Reich occasionally argue that Africa was not at the center of the expansions in critical periods, and provide very convincing evidences they come from the Americas, but right next to it they once more make things fit in the consensus with African origin, the latter in our opinion to avoid conflicts with consensus and consensus-minded colleagues and sponsors. Quite similar to where these scientists like David Reich suggest the immigrant subject of the former and this video came from the grass plains, and therefore call it grass plain ancestry, this from north of the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and alternating, he and others claim these arriving people originated from the Yamnaya or horsemen. Yet, in the former video we saw that these Yamnaya or horsemen were not the new YDNA haplogroup R1b that would become dominant in Europe and Western Eurasia 4,500 years ago, and that today are dominant across the world. So we claim that this 4,500 years ago arriving YDNA haplogroup R1b's genetics and ancestry are not explained at all by the suggestion of the grass plain ancestry. This new YDNA haplogroup R1b could only have come from its root R1, which was continuously present only in the Americas since prehistoric times. At least since 47,000 years ago early modern humans had been arriving from the Americas to land on the Atlantic facades, especially on the European Atlantic facades, and specifically around and east of Gibraltar and inside the Mediterranean, as far east as Canaan, Turkey, and beyond. Simply because certain currents transport more water towards the European Atlantic facades and in the direction of the Mediterranean and Black Sea than all the rivers of the world combined. Transport to all the oceans of the world. Many if not most humans know what the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation or AMOC is, and that it was there and active during human history, in fact active during Earth's history. They are of American origin. So instead of out of the pun intended or ironically meant magician's hat, the new YDNA haplogroup R1b came out of the Americas, which presented the oldest mummies, oldest pyramids or ziggurats. What is important here is that the new YDNA haplogroup R1b started to thrive in Europe and beyond, this from 4,500 years ago on. The new YDNA haplogroup R1b represented the American warriors that would carry out the population turnover events. These new YDNA haplogroup R1b arrived thousands of years after the American farmers had arrived. The women of the American farmers also carried mtDNA haplogroup X, and consensus that does not even consider American origin calls them the Anatolian farmers. The men of the American farmers also carried YDNA haplogroup YDNA G and J2. The arrival of YDNA haplogroup R1b is roughly 1,400 years before the Bronze Age collapse 3,100 years ago. So the arrival of YDNA haplogroup R1b is roughly 1,400 years before the Bronze Age collapse 3,100 years ago, and the collapse of the drainage of the Greek lake Kopais or swamp, which is also the subject of an interesting and rather compact video of the One-Eyed Giant Building Walls channel. In those 1,400 years the YDNA haplogroup R1b will replace or turn over the then-present populations, in what is called a population turnover event of continental scale, and next to this turnover the YDNA haplogroup R1b will thrive. We claim that amongst others, this was so, because they knew to produce better or more efficient iron weapons and tools, or to make better use of iron weapons and tools, like for instance plows with iron blades or shares. In our view, the YDNA haplogroup R1b were leading and representing a new not much recognized period with a new and important kind of agricultural revolution. In essence, the period 4,000 to 5,000 years ago was characterized not by the origin of agriculture, simply because agriculture in general had begun much earlier, around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. Please also remind of Göbekli Tepe, which was built by YDNA Haplogroup G, and farmed by YDNA Haplogroup J and mtDNA Haplogroup X. The period 4,000 to 5,000 years ago was rather characterized by agricultural substantial intensification, expansion, and integration into large-scale, complex human civilizations. Expansion and sedentism. Farming societies completely replaced hunter-gatherers across much of Western Eurasia, this around 6,000 years ago. In China, agricultural communities using both millet and rice systems flourished and expanded. Haplogroup X2, as a broad lineage, is estimated to have arisen approximately 16,000 to 21,000 years ago, and according to consensus this in the Near East. According to us, this haplogroup X2 had arisen in the Americas. This American origin is indicated by the fact that the Americas already presented the prehistoric YDNA or male haplogroup root or cradle R1, and this male haplogroup obviously was associated with the also prehistoric mtDNA or the female haplogroup X, and all of its descendants. Both groups' association with early farmers in Europe and Western Eurasia is linked to the Neolithic expansion, which began around 11,000 years ago in the Near East. The American farmers, which were not the YDNA haplogroup R1b because this haplogroup R1b people were rather warriors. These haplogroup R1b warriors were preceded by the farmers with thousands of years. Short story. To make a rather long story short, the unsustainable intensive agriculture degenerated all agricultural lands in a record period of only 1,400 years, and the warriors, which the one-eyed giant building walls channel originally calls the dragons, and or those most associated with the warriors, had expanded in the typical Bronze Age culture areas. After they had been carefully isolated from strategic resources, like for instance tin, but possibly also from fertilizers, in before, or Cornwall mining was prepared and building finished. Important tin resources were available amongst others in the region of Cornwall in England, and this area had been prepared by the miners and builders, amongst others of Stonehenge in Cornwall itself. When mining was prepared and building finished, the warriors of Group R1b would install themselves to defend and to use Cornwall as a logistic hub, also a bridge between the Americas and Eurasia, as well as a bridgehead for excursions into the Bronze Age economies and cultures, now more and more limited and driven to the east of the Mediterranean. This combo of isolation from resources like tin and fertilizers, together with incursions, led to, or at least accentuated the food production challenges, as well as climate challenges of the Bronze Age cultures, and ultimately the late Bronze Age collapse around 3,100 years ago. The One-Eyed Giant Building Walls channel presents in one of its videos an interesting thesis that the Sea Peoples were Bronze Age culture-related peoples that fled the expansion and consequent violence, which we claim dominantly came, just as during the population turnover events of 4,500 years ago and before, from the American YDNA haplogroup R1b, which the One-Eyed Giant Building Walls channel originally calls the dragons. The One-Eyed Giant Building Walls channel calls the group R1b like dragons, amongst others because they did not bury their deaths, but cremated their deaths. Others relate the Sea Peoples directly to the population turnover events of 4,500 years ago and before, from the American YDNA haplogroup R1b, which also was associated with the Bell Beaker culture. For some historians, the Sea Peoples were a mixed population with genetic ties to the Aegean region and the Levant. Ancient DNA from Ashkelon shows individuals clustering with Mycenaean Greeks, and also with local Levantine populations, indicating a mixture of these groups. Other theories suggest connections to specific haplogroups like R1BZ2103, from the Aegean, and possibly J1L829, from the Levant, in the case of Phoenician influences. We opt for the hypothesis that the Sea Peoples were a mixed population with also Bronze Age-related people, which were affected by the continuous and serious agricultural soil degeneration, and on top of that weakened, while being under pressure and threatened by the expanding, for warfare well-prepared and violent, American YDNA haplogroup R1b. One of the Sea Peoples' objectives, next to the pressure from the already present and advancing Indo-European warriors, and possibly with relative newcomers from the north, as well as from the Americas, was to run for them last resort. So them being Bronze Age related, they navigated with ships and ran with their complete households, on the run and in despair for Egypt, and up the Nile. So there were two main groups. A. Them being Bronze Age related. B. Them being Indo-European related, fit the descriptions. What we could and should learn from this is that in the absence of sustainable and or regenerating practices, like the sustainable and regenerating carbon agroforests, soil degeneration can proceed very quickly and lead to quite sudden and general calamities and collapses, as clearly seen during the Bronze Age collapses. It is known that soil degeneration worldwide is around 35%, and is expected to have become 90% by the year 2050. No rocket science is needed to foresee what is about to happen soon, if nothing will be done. All indicates that nothing will be done in any near future, because in fact the subject of soil degeneration is possibly deliberately tucked away, or at best does not make headlines at all. To address labor shortages and boost productivity in the agricultural sector, the trend in agricultural machines is towards greater mechanization and enhanced capabilities. This certainly involves and possibly leads to more powerful and heavier machines, that if not corrected or compensated will lead to ever faster soil degeneration. So this dire and dark part of history could and most probably will repeat, or in part already is repeating. Our channel presents videos about Yersinia pestis or the medieval Black Death, which followed a quite similar pattern, or rather was preceded by soil degradation, which occurred as a consequence of unsustainable and intensifying agricultural practices. Even coming to zero emissions will not at all positively affect this, for existence essential, aspect of the extremely fast aggravating and relatively unknown, unchecked and unattended soil degeneration, which ironically is an important and increasing cause of carbon dioxide emissions. Soil degradation is an important and increasing source of greenhouse gas, or GHG emissions, a process that is particularly ironic, because healthy soil is a vital natural carbon sink. Degraded soils lose their ability to store carbon, instead releasing stored carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane into the atmosphere. In case you like action over empty promises, and the here proposed initiative or action plan, for either solutions for climate challenges, or for humans to thrive like never before, or a carbon agroforest world, and carbon agroforest economy, or like the quite unique information in this video, please subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, question, or a like on this video. This and other videos of this channel are translated and or dubbed in over 5 languages, including the official languages of all 9 Amazon forest countries, this for this initiative and plan to succeed, to unite all 8 billion humans across the world, in and through this carbon agroforest action plan, and economy.